Something strange just happened in the United States housing market. Washington made a big move. It cut lumber tariffs on Canadian wood almost in half. That should mean cheaper wood, right? Lower building costs, more affordable homes? But that's not what's happening. Prices aren't falling the way people expected. And the reason? A new kind of barrier is rising, not made of steel or paperwork, but carbon. To really understand the current tensions over lumber, we need to take a step back and look at the long, tangled history between the United States and Canada. This isn't just a recent disagreement. It's a dispute that's been simmering for generations, shaping the economies and communities on both sides of the border. For over 40 years, the United States and Canada have been locked in a recurring battle over softwood lumber. The stakes are high. Billions of dollars, thousands of jobs, and the livelihoods of entire towns depend on the outcome. Every few years, the dispute flares up again, making headlines and sparking heated debates among politicians, industry leaders, and workers. At the heart of the conflict is a fundamental disagreement. The United States claims that Canada gives its lumber producers an unfair advantage by allowing them to harvest trees from government-owned land at low prices. This, they argue, amounts to a subsidy, making Canadian wood much cheaper than American lumber and putting U.S. producers at a disadvantage. Canadian officials, on the other hand, insist their system is fair and that American complaints are just protectionism in disguise. Because of these ongoing accusations, Washington has repeatedly imposed tariffs on Canadian lumber, sometimes reaching as high as 18%. These tariffs ripple through the industry, raising prices for builders and homebuyers, and fueling frustration on both sides of the border. The dispute has become a defining feature of North American trade, with no easy resolution in sight. Now let's look at the numbers behind that United States tariff cut, and what it really means for the lumber industry, home builders, and consumers on both sides of the border. Tariffs are essentially taxes on imported goods, and when they're lowered, it's easy to assume that savings will flow directly to buyers. But the reality is often more complicated, especially in a market as complex as lumber. On paper, the recent reduction in tariffs might look generous, even dramatic. Many in the industry and beyond hoped it would translate into significant cost savings, lower prices for new homes, and a boost for Canadian exporters. But as we'll see, the impact is shaped by a web of factors, from supply chain bottlenecks to market demand, and even the strategies of lumber companies themselves. When the United States dropped its softwood lumber tariffs from 8.59% to 4.02%, it meant Canadian lumber suddenly became cheaper to import. This change was especially significant for Canadian producers, who have long faced steep duties when selling into the massive U.S. market. For years, these tariffs have been a source of tension between the two countries, affecting everything from trade negotiations to the price of a new deck or home addition. Specifically, the tariff cut created a cost advantage of around $29 per ton for popular types like spruce, pine, and fir, the backbone of North American construction. These species, harvested in provinces like British Columbia and Quebec, are in high demand for framing houses, building furniture, and countless other uses. For Canadian mills, the lower tariff means they can offer their lumber at more competitive prices, potentially increasing their share of the U.S. market. If you convert that into the industry's standard unit, 1,000 board feet, it's about a $45 to $47 drop in price. But here's the catch. While this reduction sounds substantial, it doesn't always mean that savings are passed directly to consumers or builders. Other factors like transportation costs, fluctuating demand, and the pricing strategies of retailers can absorb much of the benefit. So, while the tariff cut is a step toward easing costs, its real-world impact is often less dramatic than the numbers suggest. Here's where the game changes completely. Canada's draft proposal introduces a carbon border tax on softwood lumber, and it works very differently from traditional tariffs. Instead of focusing on the price of the wood, it focuses on how much carbon dioxide was emitted during its production. Think of it as measuring the climate cost of each shipment. With the United States cutting duties and Canada raising a carbon wall, the North American lumber market has entered a tug-of-war. And the rope is your wallet. Let's look at what happens when these two forces collide. What if this carbon pricing isn't just about softwood lumber? Buried in the Canadian draft is a footnote. Easy to miss, but with massive implications. It hints at expanding the carbon border fee to include other wood-derived products: plywood, MDF, veneer panels, pulp, and more. So, is Canada's carbon border fee truly about saving the planet? Or is it more about protecting its own economy? This question sits at the heart of a heated debate, not just in Canada, but around the world. On one hand, the government frames the policy as a bold step in the fight against climate change, aiming to reduce global emissions and encourage greener practices. On the other, critics argue it's a strategic move to shield Canadian industries from foreign competition, especially in sectors like lumber, steel, and manufacturing, where carbon costs can make or break a business. Legally, Canada has a strong hand. The country has carefully crafted its carbon border fee to withstand international scrutiny, ensuring it aligns with both domestic law and global trade agreements. Canadian officials have spent years preparing for potential legal challenges, consulting with trade lawyers and environmental experts to make sure the policy stands up in courtrooms and at international tribunals. Under WTO rules, countries are allowed to impose environmental taxes under what's called the green box exception, as long as they apply the same rules at home. This means Canada can't just slap a fee on imports and give its own companies a free pass. The policy must be fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory, treating domestic and foreign producers equally when it comes to carbon emissions. And Canada does. The government has made a point of applying its carbon pricing system across the board, ensuring that Canadian businesses face the same costs and incentives as their international competitors. This approach not only strengthens Canada's legal position, but also signals to the world that the policy is about climate action, not just trade protectionism. Its own carbon tax is rising to 170 Canadian dollars per ton by 2030, which shows it's not just targeting foreign goods. This steady increase is designed to push all businesses, Canadian and foreign alike, to innovate, cut emissions, and invest in cleaner technologies. Whether you see it as a trade weapon or a climate strategy, one thing is clear: Canada is betting big on carbon pricing to shape the future of its economy and its environment.